Hi, I'm Alli Kerr, Women's Fitness Expert, and today I'm so excited and fortunate to be interviewing Dan the Man, Dr. Dan Ritchie. And Dan, he is the owner of Miracles Fitness in West Lafayette, Indiana, and he was also voted the Trainer of the Year in 2014, which is a big deal. That was at Club Fitness or Club Industry meeting, and he was up against 500 other trainers from 8 different nations. So he's a pretty big deal. And one of the things about Dan, and the reason I wanted to interview him, is because he actually specializes in those that are in that age 50 and older, people that have joint issues, health issues. So if you fall into that category, Dan is going to be a great resource, and he's going to help us learn what we need to know to make sure we're living our best no matter what age we are. So welcome, Dan.
Well, thanks so much for having me. Thanks for that introduction.
Well, let's get started, Dan. I just want to know, can you just tell us how you got started in the fitness industry, and have you always been an expert on exercise for the 50 and older demographic?
Yeah, great question. So I did my bachelor's in fitness and sports medicine at Southeast Missouri State, and I really, at that time, thought I wanted to train athletes, and I was really on the path to be a strength coach. And I spent a year strength coaching in grad school and realized I do not want to work with athletes the rest of my life. In fact, I don't know if I can work with them another year. And so I left that opportunity and moved on to finish my master's degree in an education and PE emphasis. And while I was there, in Wisconsin, I just fell in love with training older clients. In fact, I became a personal trainer at a large health club. And, this is late 90s. And let's be honest, most personal trainers, if you were lucky, had a college degree. And so here's this 23, 24-year-old kid that had trained athletes, had some experience with high-end athletes, Division I, some of whom were professionally drafted. But I'd never really worked with people over 50. And they kept coming to me, I think probably just because I was the most educated trainer on the staff, And so pretty quickly I realized, wow, I can have a huge impact on people 50, 60, 70 years old. I can solve their problems, some of which are minor. And a lot of it goes back to sport performance. It's coordination, it's athletic movement, it's range of motion, it's flexibility. It's not overly complex, but guess what? Nobody's doing it. I started looking around in the fitness industry and realized no one is paying attention to people over 50. No one's developing programs for them. I started digging, well, who's got the resource for balance training? Because I had clients coming to me saying, I'm having trouble with balance. And there was nothing out there at all. And so I decided this was going to really be my passion. I really just fell in love with it. I had one guy, nearly him and myself were both brought to tears when he tied his shoes again for the first time in years, at 72, and it was like, it seems like a trivial thing, but when you're 72 and you can't tie your own shoes, and it wasn't because he was overweight, it was because he'd had multiple knee replacements and he just didn't have the range of motion. In about 4 weeks, I helped him do that, and I realized I can help thousands, millions of people, really, so that kind of began my journey, and I decided to pursue a PhD in kinesiology with a minor in gerontology, the study of aging, and that really set my career in motion.
Wow, that's awesome. And I love working. That's one of my favorite demographics is women really in their 60s and beyond, of course 50s too, but it's so rewarding to work with that demographic. I love working, and like you said, things so trivial that we take for granted, like tying your shoes. That's a really big deal, and those are huge successes, of course. And I work a lot with women, so weight loss is a big thing that I work with. But I love working with those other things, the health issues and those little things that we take for granted. So talk to us about joint issues and exercise. I know that there are people out there, because I hear this from women and men, that they are afraid to exercise because of some type of joint issue. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, well, we have to realize that the number one health condition that people over the age of 50 are dealing with is arthritis. And so the statistics on that are just overwhelming. So to think we can train someone over 50 the same way we train a 20-year-old or a 30-year-old is really just not true. And some people make that mistake, and even 50-year-olds will make that mistake. They'll think, well, don't treat me like I'm old, right? You know, I want to be trained like a 20-year-old. It's like, well, that may be true, but your knees don't want to be trained like 20-year-old knees, you know. So we just talk about how can we keep things really intense and at a very high fitness level without really impacting joint health. And so we just have to get smarter in terms of some of the high impact activities.
Sure.
You know, the step aerobics of the 80s, you know, what we learned from that is that fitness instructors were wearing their knees out by their 40s. They just can't, our bodies are not designed to take that quantity of high impact activity. And so there's really two sides of the coin. It's an interesting dilemma in that if you have knee pain, hip pain, back pain, arthritis pain in your hands, sometimes you'll tend to think, well, I can't exercise because I have too much joint pain.
Yes.
And so it becomes this kind of double-edged sword. We know exercise is actually the best medical remedy for arthritis, yet beginning an exercise program can be painful and uncomfortable. And so a lot of times people make the mistake of thinking, well, I'll just avoid exercise because it hurts. When in reality, if they would begin a program 6 weeks down the road, their arthritis is going to feel better than ever. In fact, we've had some physicians in our program who have found, you know, the best cure for the arthritis in my feet has been regular exercise at your facility. And this is a physician who's approaching 60. And the reality is we know from science that exercise helps arthritis pain. So it helps joints heal. It helps joints be stronger. It helps joints be healthier. But sometimes there is sort of a 3 to 4 week period of, you know, am I going to see the results of this? And so the other thing that is worth mentioning is that we're seeing just an explosion in joint replacements in our country.
Oh, yes.
And this is largely due to the fact that baby boomers have been very active, and they want to continue to be active.
Absolutely.
And their knee or their hip is failing on them. And we have these amazing orthopedic opportunities now where people can get their knee replaced and not have pain. But when you have a joint replacement, it's not like you got $1 million man or a bionic woman part. You know, I mean, let's be honest. It's not original tissue. It's not a goal to just say, well, I'll beat my body up and then get my joints replaced. So we have to exercise smarter. There are some things that are contraindicated. We're going to want to be careful about high impact activities, a lot of jumping movements. But we can still be smart and exercise at a really high level, you know. So someone in their 70s and 80s with multiple joint replacements can still exercise at an extremely intense level. They just have to be a little bit smarter than maybe a 20-year-old who thinks they can beat themselves up in the gym. So that's kind of it on a nutshell. There are a few other things that we get into and we tweak as people get older, kind of by decades. The other thing to keep in mind too is that sometimes as we get a little bit older, we need a little more rest. I mean, I already see this at age 40. You know, I'm a lot more susceptible to overtraining than I was at age 20. You know, at age 20, I could probably get away with training too much, you know, doing too much volume. You know, at age 40, my body will tell me, hey, we need a day off, you know. So,
take a break.
and that gets more so with every decade, you know. So somebody who's 70 probably shouldn't be training extremely intensely 7 days a week. You know, I mean, they need some recovery time.
Absolutely. And let's talk about a little bit about the decades. What about the person that thinks that it's too late to start exercising? Maybe my body's too far gone or I'm too old to exercise. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, that's absolutely not true. I always tell people, you know, no matter how much you're saying to yourself, well, I wish I had started, you know, 6 months ago or a year ago. Look, you're where you are today, right. You know, so let's worry about where you are today, and the reality is today can be the new beginning for you. So it really is never too late. I mean, the only exception to that would be, you know, once you've had a massive stroke and you're in a nursing home bed and you can't get out of it anymore, you know, so don't wait till that point, you know.
Absolutely. Please don't wait till that point.
Yeah, you don't want to wait till you're physically incapacitated that you can't begin, you know. So if you still have the ability to come in to a facility or work out in your own home, you can start, you know. So we have seen people come in their 90s and begin an exercise program with us. So when everyone has an age number in their mind, right? Oh, well, when I'm 80, it would be too late. Absolutely not. You know, we have people in their 90s come in. I don't think we've had anyone over 100 yet. but I know other facilities have, and there's really no reason that any age is too late. Just started a client recently at 92. So if you're saying to yourself, well, it's too late for me, it absolutely is not too late for you. We have seen people in their late 80s who have had their driving privileges taken away, regain them, and they start to think like, is this it for me? Like, if they're taking my driving privileges away, like my life is over. And in 6 months, we had his driving privileges back. He was stronger, he was quicker, his reaction time was better, and he got his driving privileges back. So
talk about freedom. Wow.
Yeah, that's a huge change, right? Somebody takes your driving privileges away, your life can feel over. So there really is no age that's too late. You just don't want to wait until you're so physically incapacitated that somebody has to take care of you. When you get to the point where somebody else is helping you out of bed, then it gets more challenging for a fitness program to help you, for sure.
Absolutely, yes. So let's talk about those that are just maybe hitting that 50 or even, 50 and older. What are the biggest mistakes that you see those as far as fitness, biggest fitness mistakes you see those in like that 50 and beyond? What mistakes are we making?
Okay, I'll give you three. There are probably a dozen, but I'll give you three.
Okay.
So the number one biggest mistake, and women are probably more guilty of this than men, is not doing what I call full body functional strength movements. So you really can break that down into, I go do the circuit at curves, or I do the circuit of machines in my gym, or I do a set routine of, barbell exercises. As we get older, we start to lose functional movement patterns. And what I mean by that is just things like bending, twisting, reaching,
Yes.
turning, picking stuff up off the floor. All these kinds of movement patterns are complex, and we need to be training those in a strength movement. And so machines don't do that for us. So the number one thing is I tell people, you got to get off these seated machines. You can use them as a supplement, that's fine.
Right.
But your primary fitness movements need to be things like squats and lunges and overhead presses and, all sorts of dynamic movement patterns with a strength component. So that's number one. Number two is not training hard enough. Right. And I think fitness professionals and individuals are guilty of this because they think, I'm 55 now, or I'm 65 now and I'm retired, I shouldn't exercise that hard. Well, it's the same principle that you learn at the foundation of exercise training. If we don't overload the system, we get no response. And so if we don't train hard enough to stimulate our bodies to get more fit, we never get more fit. And so 65-year-olds all of a sudden are like, exercise really isn't producing results for me. It's like, well, yeah, because all you're doing is walking on the treadmill, So intensity is a big mistake. The third thing I think that I see all too common is that people think, I've reached a certain age, my joints are old, so I need to be in the pool. And so they do way too much exercise in the pool. Now, I'm all for water aerobics and, swimming and all sorts of things you can do in the pool. That's fine. But if that becomes your only source of exercise, unfortunately, you have to operate on land, right? Like you have to deal with gravity every day. And while the water is kinder and friendlier to our joints, it doesn't train balance very well. It doesn't train lower body strength very well. It doesn't give us a lot of impact activities that maintain bone density. And so I see too many women sort of enter the water in their 60s, and they're not getting the kind of functional strength and bone density activity they need to maintain their lower body strength, their balance, and those sorts of things. Because other than being in the water for exercise, we're not living in a water environment, So those are kind of three big mistakes I see. Obviously, there are others, but that's a good takeaway.
Yeah, and you just answered my question, which was kind of goes along with the water thing. But why are the standing exercises so important versus sitting on the machine or versus the water? And you talk about the balance and.
The big thing really is the balance and the body control. And as we age, what we see is. And sometimes we overemphasize strength, but strength's an important factor.
Sure.
But if our strength drops 20%, it doesn't really dramatically change our lives. But if you add to that, our balance drops 5%, our reaction time drops 5%, our speed drops 5%. Now all of a sudden, we have a 30 to 40% total decline in this functional movement aspect. Well, you can get in the water and feel just fine, right?
Sure.
And in fact, if you lose your balance in the water, it's not a big deal. The water kind of catches you. You lose your balance, in your environment coming down those stairs, and you can seriously hurt yourself. And so you have to be doing activities on your feet so that your body learns that lower body strength component, that lower body balance component. Those are really essential for function, and when it comes down to it, people want to be functional. They don't necessarily care about how much they can squat or leg press or how many laps they can swim. They want to be able to move, and they want to be able to move independently. Nobody really wants to be that 90-year-old that needs help out of a chair, right? I mean, we want to live independently, and so doing exercise on your feet is crucial for that.
Yes, and in our 20s it might have been really cool to say we could lift this or squat that, but that becomes a lot less relevant when you're really just talking about tying your shoes or getting up and down out of a chair. That changes, it changes things.
Cody and I joke about, the bench press activity. It's probably not an exercise that women brag about a whole lot, but men talk about how much they can bench, right? Well, let's be honest, you get into your 50s, 60s, and 70s, unless a refrigerator falls on you, you don't need to be able to bench press a lot of weight, right? I mean, it's just not a movement where I have to press something up off of me, right? I mean, it's an exercise that really is a football move because we have to push a guy in front of us. And it's really a pretty non-functional, useless exercise, but you hear people, well, how much can you bench? Well, who cares, right? I mean,
Yeah, I recently had a client ask me, because I've competed in fitness competitions, and so she texted me and said, "So how much can you bench press?" And I texted her back and I said, "I have no idea."
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And she was shocked that I didn't know. So.
Yeah, I have no idea because I have not barbell bench. I haven't barbell bench pressed since I was 32, and I tell people it took me until age 32 to be smart enough to realize this is a useless exercise, and I stopped doing it. And of course, I've since heard of way too many people getting hurt doing that exercise. So
sure, yeah. Well, let me ask you about females a little bit. In particular, my audience is primarily female. Of course, I have some males as well. So tell me the differences that you see, because I know you train men and women, and you've trained lots of men and women at over 50. So tell me what differences you see, and we'll talk about maybe mindset, goals, ability, results, maybe hit on any of those.
Yeah, great question. Yeah, we definitely, 3/4 of our clients are women as well. So women still seem to be more interested in taking care of their health than men, unfortunately. But I would say probably the big difference is that women for far too long have fell victim to the myth that if they lift weights, they're going to get big and bulky. I mean, you're a perfect example of that, right? You've been a fitness competitor and you've lifted weights, and look how big and bulky you are. So
don't I look like a guy too? That's the other. I don't want to look like a man.
Right, exactly, right. And I always say, look. You can strength train really, really hard as a woman, and you're not going to turn into me. It's like you're not going to get.
I'm not going to look like you, and you're not going to look like me. That's
you're not going to get huge, and I don't know where this myth came from, but I think there's just been too much stuff put out about lift light weights and do toning and all this sort of stuff, which none of which is founded in exercise science at all. And so what happens is women come in at 55, 60, 65 years old, and they're really weak. Relative to where they should be, and they don't even realize how weak they are. And so strength training for them is like an amazing fountain of youth, because all of a sudden in 6 months they're like, wow, I feel as strong as when I was in my 30s. And I'm like, exactly, that's what we want. And so it can be a dramatic change in terms of just all kinds of things, right? Like 40-pound bags of salt got to the point where they were impossible. Well, now I can do that. Heavy bags of dog food, you name the task, all of a sudden it becomes much more easy to do. Things like carrying a grandchild up and down stairs might be a life-threatening activity if you're 62 years old and you're weak. But now if you're strong and you feel like you're 32 again, that's a piece of cake, right? You can pick up your 4-year-old, put him over your shoulder, and take him up to bed, So those are huge things that we see for women. Men typically, I would say, come in much stronger. They've maintained their strength better. They just have much poorer movement quality, and they're just not
Yes.
moving well. So
Very
they might be
tight.
strong. They might be strong, but their balance is gone. Their coordination
Yes.
is gone. Their ability to use that strength in a functional way is gone. And they sort of express it like, I feel like I've gotten clumsier. It's sort of like, over the last 20 years, I have become that bull in a china shop because I just don't have as good a control of my movements, So those are big differences. I think the other one too is that women, not all women, but a large percentage of women are intimidated by the gym atmosphere. They're fearful of sort of stereotypical health clubs, which is why I think, online programs are great, but having a fitness facility like we do that is set up for women over 50 is so key, because they walk in and they're like, oh, you get me. You understand why I'm so afraid to go to the typical health club, because the typical health club is still designed for a 20 to 30-year-old Ken and Barbie. And it's just not a place where a woman over 50 feels wanted, feels understood. And so, sure, there are some women in their 50s who are like, hey, I can go anywhere. Nobody intimidates me. But you're the exception. The reality is most women and men over 50 want something a little more relaxing, a little more comfortable, a little more professional, a little less nightclubby, a little less, high testosterone, a little too much crazy going on, I sort of say, So if we can't get the environment to be something people are comfortable in, how can we expect them to become part of this family? And so, again, this is where, interviews like this and online coaching programs somebody can do from the comfort of their own home can really help, because you don't have to go to a gym.
Yeah. And finding, and like you own a facility where you, like you said, if you are going to a facility, finding somewhere that's maybe not the typical gym, but finding somewhere that can help you a little bit more.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, where you're more comfortable. Thank you so much, Dana. It was great to interview you, and just thanks for all that you do for the fitness community. And one of the things that Dan does is he actually trains. He's one of the co-founders of the Functional Aging Institute, and so Dan actually trains other trainers in how to train people that are in that 55-ish and older demographic. So he is such a great resource to the fitness industry, and of course the people's lives that he's touched as a trainer and as facility owner, and training his trainers in his facility. So I just really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to do this interview.
Absolutely. So glad to do it. Love doing this kind of thing anytime.
Yeah, and I will put a link to your website. And do you have anything coming up that you want to let us know about, any kind of projects? Or I'm going to put a link to your facility website. Would that be the best one?
Sure.
Okay, and I'll post that up on my blog so people can check you out and find you there.
Yeah, we've got a couple things I'll let you know about. One is actually a new program called Vibrant Fitness for Women, which is a program.
Hey, ladies!
Really a program we designed for women 45 plus. Women of any age could use it, but it's really sort of designed for women about to enter menopause, to coming out of menopause, and really give a lot of the functional strength stuff that we talked about today. We've got some other programs I can send you links to as well if people are interested. So yeah, we've got a lot of resources we're developing, and like you said, the Functional Aging Institute. If you have an audience around the world, we have functional aging specialists around the world. There are over 50 in Australia already, just to give you an idea. So if people are halfway across the world and they're like, I want a trainer like what we've been talking about, we can probably hook them up.
Awesome. That's a great resource. Thank you so much, Dan, and we'll let you get back to your busy schedule, but we really appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you for tuning in and checking out part 1 of this interview with Dr. Dan Ritchie. I will be posting part 2 of the interview on my blog at www.allikerr.com. In the second part of the interview, Dr. Ritchie is going to break down each decade, the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and talk about the different changes that are going on in our bodies and lives during those different decades. And he's going to talk to us and teach us what we need to be doing now so that we can make sure that we all live vibrant lives into our 90s and beyond. Until next time.